I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for...
Sure. Is this quiet enough? Or?
This is perfect.
Oh,
totally
okay.
fine. Just thank you very much for taking the time to sit and meet with us.
Yeah.
And our listeners were really cool and very excited to watch your sound check. And before I forget, when I was watching your sound check, it seems like things are in like a work in progress. Like you have a solid piece that you've created in the past. So what drives you to want to alter it now?
Yeah. I feel that well, it's a long question, a long answer, but I'll give a short answer. In the beginning of the band, I was very hell-bent on sort of creating an original sound, and we were able to do that to a certain extent. But when people started imitating the sound, not just us, other bands obviously of the early 90s, I kind of got weirded out, and I thought, well, I'm just going to sort of reinvent another sound. And so I kind of went on this very long musical journey of trying to figure out all these other ways to play music. And ultimately, when I came back to the Pumpkins around 2005, 2006, I sort of had taken this long journey and decided in a weird kind of way that I wanted to go back to the way I'd played in the beginning, because it was the closest thing to the way that I felt. Even though I'd have all these other experiences, the sound of the Smashing Pumpkins was ultimately a close reflection of the way I wanted to play music.
Okay.
But it took me a long time to figure that out.
Right.
And so once I figured that out, it's been sort of trying to figure out how to take what I like about that and sort of explore different territories with the guitar sounds and the guitar approaches and in the songwriting approaches, but with the foundation of not feeling that I have to kind of go off and find another country or something.
Right.
So the work is really more sort of nuancy work, looking for sort of small moments of inspiration.
Okay. You touched on a key word that I wanted to bring up, territory. What kind of territory is uncharted for you? Is there a direction musically that you want to go?
Yeah, I still think for rock music, electronic music is probably some fairly uncharted territory. People are using technology a lot these days, computers, and a lot of rock records are basically made in the computer.
Right.
But I think electronic music still has a great vista that's sort of untapped. Most electronic music is by design repetitive and trance-inducing and things like that. And I think rock and roll has not quite yet figured out how to somehow apply what makes rock and roll great, which is spontaneity and sort of things rubbing against each other and take whole technology. I still think there's a fusion there that can happen that's pretty uncharted.
It's so funny you should mention electronic music. There's a DJ, his name is Castlevania. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia. Have you ever heard of him? Okay, he did a mashup of Zero Machine, with a mashup with Zero and then Rage Against the Machine. You've got to check it out if you haven't. It's pretty cracking. Being such a huge fan of dance music, it's huge. It's electro. I don't know how you feel about electro, but the kids are into it. So, congratulations, by the way, on your single. It's doing really well right now. Our station's spinning it pretty tough, and it's getting a great response. Okay.
The idea was kind of like let people sort of watch the movie as the movie's being made, and also sort of not ask people to try to take on too much, because in this current climate, sometimes if you put out a lot of music, if people don't like it, they tend to dismiss it right away, and they Twitter, I don't like it, and then someone goes, oh, and they don't listen to it. They don't give it that second or third opportunity. It's just the speed our culture's moving at, and there's so much other information to get into. So I thought it would be better if we sort of slowed the process down, which in a way would also force a higher quality per release. And so far I think that's something that we're sort of still moving towards a higher and higher statement of what I'm trying to figure out for the future. So it's sort of a journey, and so Freak right now is sort of the latest of the journey, and there's another song coming on September 14th, a really pretty song, so I'm excited about that one. It's a song I really like.
What can fans expect from your show tonight, or for shows in the future? It's kind of a loaded question.
No, for a long time I approached the show as it had to be a singular experience. And Smashing Pumpkin shows were very chaotic. We played really long shows, usually 2:45 to 3 hours and 15 minutes long. So a normal Smashing Pumpkin show, you would see any number of songs, and you come back the next time, you play a whole bunch of different songs.
Right.
And I started to find that the modern audience they've gravitated towards more of a greatest hits mentality.
Yeah.
And so the difficulty there is you can fight it, but you don't really get anything for fighting it. You end up with a lot of upset people going on their websites and saying, and their blogs and saying, this is terrible, why did I go?
Right.
When you could very easily sort of find that balance that they're looking for. So what we've tried to do is pick the easy high moments from the past, things that are sort of no-brainer issues. And then the rest of the show is pretty much just more of an artistic statement. I don't play any songs I don't want to play, and so the show's a little shorter, but they're, in our estimation, sort of punchier,
right,
and a little bit more high energy than they used to be.
Okay.
We're always evolving. We just put in 2 new songs in the show, so I think we just started that a couple shows ago. So both songs unreleased. So in the middle of all this stuff that maybe is somewhat familiar, then you have unreleased songs and jams and stuff like that too.
Well, I imagine it keeps it fresh for you as well. You know, being able to pull from such a broad career. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Oh yeah, because you've got such a library of music. A friend of mine wanted me to ask you about a tour that you did with the Afghan Whigs. Do you remember? Do you remember that?
Well, I wouldn't call it a tour. There's a little story behind that. We had some minimal interest from the Sub Pop label around 1990. And they said, if you come out here, they didn't say how we were going to get out here. We'll come see you and sort of talk about maybe doing a Sub Pop single of the month, which was a big deal at the time. I guess it might even still be a big deal if they're still doing it. And so we drove 40 hours from Chicago in a van, 6 of us.
Oh my gosh.
And the van even broke down. We had the whole drama to get here. And so we did a 3-show, mini tour, or whatever you want to call it, with Tad and the Afghan Whigs. So we were the opening band. The Afghan Whigs, I believe, were the headliners, and I believe Tad was second.
Right.
And so we played 1 show in Seattle, 1 show at Satyricon in Portland, and we played in Chino, California. That's all I remember.
Good old Chino. Well, before I let you go, thank you very much for doing this. You're heading to Portland tomorrow, I believe. Do you have any advice for musicians nowadays? I get people asking this question all the time. What advice can you give me? How can I be a better songwriter? Do you have anything to say?
I think if you would look somewhat objectively at the history of popular music and or rock and roll in particular, the one thing that stands out to me is the singular most definable thing. Well, that's horrible English. The thing that sticks out the most to me is that the people who really make an interesting path of their musical life are the ones that are truly individuals, and you can count, pretty quickly the people who are true originals in rock and roll. Whether it's Jimi Hendrix or Kurt Cobain or Crosby, Stills and Nash, they all had a singular sound and in a lot of ways a singular approach to their music. They had influences and they stole things and they made up things, but ultimately, when you say to somebody that person's name, that person conjures up a very easy image of individuality. And I think the way the music business is right now, a lot of young artists feel pressure to kind of conform to some sort of kind of almost like Rock Band 101. The haircut, the tattoos, they jump around a lot. And all the radio stations, the record labels. The record labels force the bands into thinking very commercially,
yes,
and they don't necessarily always develop their own sound. But yet, if you look at who the radio really plays, they might play trendy things for a while, but the bands that they ultimately and the artists they play again and again and again are they really the individuals.
You're absolutely right.
So I often say you can have short-term success, or you can have long-term success, and I've always charted a long-term success kind of plan. I've been willing to have years and long stretches of my musical life knowing that people weren't going to understand what I was going to do, because either I was behind a trend or ahead of a trend. I wasn't sort of in the moment. And you just have to look at people like Neil Young and people like that who have charted a really long career and made a great pile of music. And they have those moments that are really high and everybody seems to enjoy. But then they create fans who then will go and investigate everything they've done. And I think that's the ultimate satisfaction, is you can actually have people who want to know your entire journey And I think if you're not going to, it just seems simple to me. If you don't want to create that journey and you don't want people to take that journey with you, why are you a musician other than wanting to get laid?
Well,
the end.
Well, fair enough if people just want to get laid, but there's
you don't need to be you don't need to be a musician to get laid.
No, there's other industries for that.
In fact, I would say that being a musician probably keeps you from getting laid.
Good to know. Well, thank you very much for talking with me. I really appreciate it.